Have you ever wished you could just, poof, split in two to get everything done? Well, you're in luck, because today we are diving headfirst into one of science's most mind-bending, sci-fi-sounding topics, cloning.
No, seriously, think about it. What would you do? Would you send your clone to that boring meeting while you, finally binge that show everyone's talking about? Or maybe have them do all your grocery shopping? Or, hey, team up and finally nail that viral dance? The possibilities are just wild. But the big question is, how close are we to making this a reality?
Okay, before we get way ahead of ourselves, let's pump the brakes and get the actual science down. So, what is cloning? At its core, it's just a creation of an exact genetic replica. And that can mean anything from a tiny little segment of DNA to a single cell, all the way up to a whole organism. You could think of it as the ultimate biological copy and paste. When most of us hear the word cloning, our minds immediately jump to secret underground labs, right? Maybe some evil twins. But what if I told you that cloning isn't just science fiction, that it's happening all around us right now? In fact, nature has been in the cloning business for millions of years. It's not just possible, it's literally everywhere.
Yeah, you heard me right. Identical twins? Those are natural human clones. Bacteria and yeast, they just clone themselves to multiply. You can literally chop a starfish in half and boom, you get two genetically identical starfish. It gets even crazier. Entire forests, like some groves of aspen or redwood trees, can be one single massive clone, all connected by their roots. I'm telling you, nature is the OG master cloner.
All right, so here's the game plan for today. We're going to dive into what would happen if you actually cloned yourself. We'll look at the blueprint of life itself, bust some major myths about human cloning, peek into a future that might be a copy, and then wrap up with some of the absolute craziest facts about cloning. You ready? Let's do this.
All right, section 1. So we've seen how nature pulls it off, but get this. We humans have been getting in on the cloning action for a very, very long time.
And I'm not talking about the last few decades. I'm talking thousands of years. Every single time you eat a banana, or most apples and grapes, guess what? You're eating fruit from a clone. We just have a different word for it. Grafting. It's literally cloning, just with a much less science fiction-y name.
So cloning plants is one thing. We've got that down. But making the jump from an apple tree to a whole living, breathing animal? Whoa, that is a massive leap. It meant we had to crack the blueprint of life itself.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? How do scientists actually clone an animal in a lab? Like, how do you take the instruction manual from one animal and use it to build a brand new, genetically identical one from scratch?
Okay, so here's the recipe. It's got a fancy name, somatic cell nuclear transfer, or SCNT for short. Step 1, you take a regular body cell, say a skin cell from the animal you want to clone. This has all the DNA, the full instruction manual. Step 2, you get an unfertilized egg cell from a donor, and you very carefully suck out its nucleus. Now you've got an empty eggshell, basically. Step 3, you pop the nucleus from the first cell into that empty egg, usually with a little electric zap to get things going. If you're lucky, that egg starts dividing and becomes an embryo. And finally, you implant that embryo into a surrogate mom. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, it's not quite that easy.
Because this exact process, as ridiculously tricky as it is, led to a breakthrough that absolutely rocked the world. It created the single most famous sheep in all of history.
Everyone, meet Dolly. Born back in 1996, she was a total rock star, the very first mammal ever to be cloned from an adult cell. Her DNA didn't come from an embryo, it came from the udder cell of a fully grown 6-year-old sheep. But here's the staggering part of her story, the reality check. She was the only live birth out of 277 cloned embryos. And tragically, Dolly only lived about half the lifespan of a normal sheep, which made everyone wonder, did she inherit the age of her 6-year-old genetic parent?
Let's just stop and think about that number. 1 out of 277. That's a success rate of less than 0.5%. It just goes to show you how unbelievably difficult and inefficient this whole process is. This isn't a Xerox machine, folks. It's more like a biological lottery, and the odds are not in your favor.
And really, that inefficiency is the biggest hurdle. Like Discover magazine puts it, most of these cloned embryos just don't make it. And in the early days of cloning, even the ones that did survive often had serious health problems, like something called large offspring syndrome, where they'd have defective organs or wonky immune systems. We've definitely gotten better at it, but it is still far, far from a perfect science.
All right, that brings us to the part of the show you've all been waiting for. We've cloned sheep, we've cloned cats, dogs, even monkeys. So what about humans?
Okay, let's bust some myths, because Hollywood gets so much wrong. Myth number 1. Your clone just magically appears as a fully grown adult. Reality? Nope. A clone starts as a baby and has to grow up just like every single one of us. Myth number 2. They're a perfect carbon copy of you. Also a big no. Their environment, their friends, their experiences, all that stuff would make them a totally different person. And the biggest myth of all? That they'd have your memories. Not a chance. A clone is a genetic twin, born later. They are not you. Okay, pop quiz time. Let's say you've got the best cat in the world. We'll call him Frankie. And you decide to clone him. Will the new kitten, let's call him Frankie Jr., be an exact carbon copy? Same personality, same cool fur pattern, everything? What do you think? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments right now.
All right, the answer is a definite no. Frankie Jr. would be a completely different cat. He'd have a different surrogate mom, grow up in a different house, have totally different experiences. See, the key thing to remember is that genetics are only half the equation. It's the classic nature versus nurture debate, right? Heck, even their mitochondrial DNA, which comes from the donor egg, wouldn't be the same.
So, why haven't we cloned a human yet? I mean, obviously there are huge ethical debates, and for good reason. But if we put the ethics aside for just 1 second, there's actually a massive biological roadblock that has stumped scientists for years.
So here's the deal. In primates, that includes us, monkeys and humans, there are these super important proteins called spindle proteins. They hang out right next to the nucleus in an egg cell, and their job is to help cells divide correctly. The problem is, when you do that step where you remove the nucleus, you accidentally take out the spindle proteins along with it. And without them, the cloned embryo just fails. It can't develop. It's a fundamental problem baked into our biology. So when you combine the huge scientific challenges with the ethical minefield, it's no surprise that most countries have just said, nope. Places like Canada, the UK, Australia, even China have all made human reproductive cloning illegal. The United States, interestingly, doesn't have a federal ban, but many states do, and you can't use federal money to even try it.
So you might be thinking, okay, with all these problems, cloning is basically a dead end, right? Well, not so fast. A totally new kind of cloning is showing up, and this one has absolutely nothing to do with DNA.
Get ready for the age of the digital clone. Instead of copying your DNA, these clones copy your data. We're talking your voice, your face, the way you talk. The method isn't some complex lab procedure. It's AI training. And the result isn't a genetic twin. It's a digital avatar that you can completely control. A digital double that could, say, attend a Zoom meeting for you, or, on the flip side, could be used to spread some serious misinformation. It's a whole new powerful and ethically tricky frontier. And what's wild is how easy it's becoming to make one. Basically, you record a few minutes of high-quality video of yourself talking. You upload it to an AI platform. The AI studies your voice, your face, everything. And when it's done, you just type a script, hit enter, and your digital double says it for you perfectly. This tech is getting more and more common every single day.
Which leads to a really cool question for the future. If you had to pick a clone, which one are you going with? Would you choose A, the biological twin, a whole other person? B, the AI avatar, a digital puppet you control? Or maybe C, go full sci-fi and upload your mind into a robotic body? I want to know what you think. Drop A, B, or C in the comments. All right, for our last section, let's do a rapid-fire round of some of the craziest and most unexpected places cloning is popping up, from saving endangered species to making big money. First up, did you know cloning can be big business? We're talking serious cash. For example, you can clone a champion barrel racing horse, and its stud fee could be $4,000. It's a way to keep the genetic legacy and the profits of a champion animal going. But it's not all about money. Cloning is becoming an incredible tool for conservation. Back in 2021, scientists successfully cloned a black-footed ferret, an endangered species, using cells that have been frozen since 1988. This could be a total game-changer for bringing species back from the very brink of extinction.
And the list of animals we've cloned is getting longer all the time. We've got sheep, cattle, goats, cats, dogs. The science just keeps moving forward. But the biggest leap forward, the one that made everyone's jaw drop, was when we finally cloned primates. Yeah, this was a huge deal. In 2018, scientists in China introduced the world to Zhongzhong and Huahua. They were the first ever primates cloned using that same method that made Dolly. This was a massive scientific step because it meant they had finally figured out a way around that whole spindle protein problem I mentioned earlier. It brought the science one giant leap closer to us.
So, when you take a step back and look at everything, the big picture is pretty clear. Cloning isn't really about making an evil twin to steal your identity. It's a really complex and powerful scientific tool that could totally change medicine, farming, and even how we save endangered animals.
Okay, so let's do a super quick recap. Takeaway number 1, cloning happens all the time in nature. 2, doing it in a lab is ridiculously hard and inefficient. 3, clones are genetic twins, not carbon copies, because your experiences matter. And 4, the future of cloning might just be digital.
So that leaves me with one last question for you. Forget about work, forget about chores. If you had a perfect digital clone, an AI avatar that would do anything you typed, what's the very first, most fun, or most ridiculous thing you'd have it do?
Get creative with it. Let me know your answer down in the comments. And hey, if you had fun geeking out about this stuff, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the wild science that's shaping our future. Thanks for watching.